Landlords fleeing the market. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee because we're going to have a look at a few articles that are discussing landlords fleeing the market, particularly in Victoria because of the new rules and laws that the government have put in place. At least, well, that's how they're framing it. It could also be, well, maybe the market just isn't providing the returns that landlords, or I think they're called rental providers or something now, in the new politically correct term, it may not be providing the return they want. What do you reckon, everyone? I mean, we've seen some horror stories of landlords, so I can, from my perspective, I'm liking the idea of the stock market more, even though all the inherent risk there, but, you know, that just may be my perspective on it. So, sell or spending, Victorian landlords grapple with new laws requiring minimum standards. And you might go, but Florian, minimum standards are good. That's what we want. Someone should have all of these bells and whistles. You know, we can't have people living in squalor. But, I mean, maybe someone, what you consider, terrible, someone else would happily endure if it allows them to save rent and get a cheaper place to live. There's the thing. The house that we are renting now, let's just say the landlord is not really putting any energy into maintaining it. They're obviously just going to sit in it and let it fall apart. You know, there's gutters not connected to downpipes. There's all this stuff from previous tenants under the place. We're not worried about it because it's not our forever home. But, you know, we got really cheap rent, really cheap, and that's all I care about. So I'll happily put up and ignore those little issues for a few months because it saves me money. Now, that's the market. That's how it works, guys. The problem is when you put all these rules in place, even for the best intentions, they may squeeze some people out of being able to afford a home. Just realize that. So let's have a look at this. Landlords selling to avoid the new laws to get out. So, landlords in financial strife across Melbourne are rushing to sell their investments as new real estate laws that require minimum standards for properties come into effect. Now, we've been talking about this for some time. Many of us were expecting a flood of investment properties to hit the market when the recession began and people started to get taps on the shoulder from the banks. But we've seen how much government intervention has occurred. We've seen how the banks have provided mortgage holidays. Will this be the final nail in the coffin for some of these landlords? The laws introduced on the 29th of March mean some landlords would rather sell up than fork out to meet what is required. And you know what will happen? The people who are living in those houses, they'll probably get kicked out so they can sell up. So it'll completely disrupt their lives. Probably the people who are living in the cheaper places, if they don't have all these amenities, they're going to be kicked out. There you go. Fantastic. Everyone's happy, isn't it? Because we've got these minimum standards. This is the unintended consequence of government intervention. I know some people may see something and think, we need to regulate that away. But this is what happens. Landlords knocked about by the pandemic are now looking to sell rather than spend to bring properties up to standard, raising fears of fewer available rentals and higher rent. There you go. That's what happens. In March, Melbourne's vacancy rate sat at 4.6%, down from 4.7% in February, Domain data has shown. Stockdale and Lego Victoria's CEO, Charlotte Pascoe, said there'd already been a rush of landlords from the outer east suburbs looking to sell up over the past few days. We're going to have a look at some of the latest weekly rental data too, and just see the surge of stuff available on the market. A Langwarrin office has received 20 requests from landlords wanting to sell, Ms. Pascoe said. It's just diabolical. It's huge. There you go. There you go, everyone. Some landlords had struggled throughout the pandemic without being able to collect rent or insurance for loss of rental, and were now faced with spending extra to fix up their properties. Perfect timing, isn't it? You know, that Andrew's government locks down the entire state, the entire economy. You can't do business, you can't trade. Oh, and we've got all these rental eviction moratoriums because, well, how is it fair to expect people to pay bills when they can't earn money? When they can't earn anything? And, you know, rental insurance? I've never heard anyone say anything good about rental insurance for lost rent. Let me know in the comments if you've had a good experience with it, or if you think it's worth it. Many of them are in really tough situations, and people think because they are landlords, they have a fancy car with lots of cash, when they may be 100% reliant on their rents to pay their mortgage, she said. They're living hand to mouth. That's the thing. Everyone thinks landlords are literally lords of the land. Well, no, most of them are normal mum and dad Australian investors. Most of them have been, encouraged to invest in property and provide housing for people because of our tax system and the way the government incentivizes that. We saw all the stories of people rent vesting that couldn't make it. All of this is going to make it harder for tenants because there will be fewer properties and rents will go up because of it. While many of the new minimum standards for rentals were formalizing what was already in place, there had been a lack of clarity around the new legislation, making landlords nervous about the future, she said. So, under the new standards introduced by the Victorian government, properties must include lockable windows and external doors, provide a working kitchen and toilet. I mean, are you going to be able to rent, can you rent something out without a working kitchen? I mean, my mother lived in a place, I think, back in Austria, a tiny apartment, and she didn't have a bathtub or a shower. She just had to wash herself in a tub. But I think the rent was cheap. Different times, guys. Different times. I hope she doesn't watch this. She'll get angry at me. Oh, well. She shared a story how my father rocked up once, and he was used to doing big shops, and he spent all of her month's worth of grocery money on one trip shopping. I don't think she was happy. So include window coverings in bedrooms and living spaces to provide privacy, so curtains. Provide a fixed heater in any property. By 2023, this heater must have a 2-star energy efficiency rating. There you go. Contain a shower head that has a water-saving rating of at least 3 stars. I mean, these are all regulations, guys. And some of this stuff is utter BS when you look into it. I know there was one project that I heard about where the developer had this showroom with all these nice Italian fixtures and fittings, and then they would just get them copied in China and get the architect to sign off on the aesthetic. And the architect would say, yeah, we'll sign off on that, but not on the Wells rating. So none of it was compliant. I don't know how they got away with it. I don't know why the architect died. Well, I know why they signed off on it, because it was a client giving them lots of money. So, have checks of gas, electrical appliances like stoves and heaters every 2 years. So every 2 years you need checks for all of these systems. I mean, is that a bit excessive? Every 2 years, getting out there is just money for gas fitters there. I mean, come on. I grew up, we had a gas leak in the property when someone hit the mains. Oh, not the mains, they hit the gas pipe when they were doing an extension on the bathroom. And so they got the fire, everything there was fine, it all got sorted, but still. Ensure there are proper switchboards with circuit breakers in rentals. I mean, see, some of these things are fine, they sound good, but they're going to ramp up the costs. They're going to be new costs. What are the timeframes to implement this? Ray White Victoria and Tasmania CEO Stephen Dullins agreed there had been some cases of rental property owners approaching agents to sell their investments. Some were older landlords who would have needed to spend thousands of dollars fixing up their properties and felt it would be easier to sell. Others, he said, would be looking at Melbourne post-pandemic booming property market and made a decision to offload their investments for possibly a huge profit, guys. A huge profit. We'll have a look at just what's available on the market. I think there may be another reason why some of these people are selling. Just a theory I have. No doubt it's on people's minds, Mr. Dolan said. What we saw at this time last year was a lot of investors having come out of the market. What we're seeing now is they're coming back. Mr. Dolan said there was a lot of conversations about the new laws, and some potential landlords wanted to snap up newer properties that would more easily comply with the minimum standards. Barry Plant, Victoria's CEO, Mike McCarthy, said he had heard some landlords were looking to sell due to the new laws. However, it was not a huge rush so far for his agents. There's not a flood, but there definitely will be some where they are not compliant, Mr. McCarthy said. I really think that this will take at least a year for it to fully play out. Landlords were nervous about what the new laws meant for them, he said. I mean, this is just what you need. in a economy that's just recovering from a recession. More government rules and regulations and interventions, guys. There's a lot of angst because of the increase in processes and procedures like the gas and electricity checks, so there's a lot of questions, Mr. McCarthy said. For landlords managing a property themselves, it's going to be very difficult. There will be a fair period of adjusting. While property managers are grappling with the changes to the laws, the Renters and Housing Union are thrilled at the introduction of minimum standards. That's the problem, guys. I know it sounds good. Minimum standard for everyone. Everyone must have this. That prices people out of the market. That increases the cost of rental property. Who pays for it, guys? Who do you think is going to pay for it? It's going to be passed on to the people who can't afford to rent. We've got I'm seeing other articles, ABC sob stories about a mother of five that's forced to squat. Never mentions how much she'd earn with that many kids on family tax benefit, even if she wasn't working. It's nuts. They never mention those things because I think maybe that's victim blaming. But still, the thing is, how can you have one side, well, it's probably the same side. The leftists are complaining about housing affordability. They're complaining about rental being too expensive. And then they implement all these rules and regulations that drive up the cost of this. And then you've got other parties, and we'll talk about this, that implement rules to avoid gentrification, which increases the cost of property and rentals. It doesn't make sense. Outsourcing housing provisions to the private market was a mistake. No, it wasn't. This is the problem. You're going to drive up the cost of housing. You're going to drive up the cost of rental. Because what do you think the government's going to do? They're going to open the floodgates as soon as they can because they want our population growth to go up because then it'll give good GDP numbers, everyone. Property needs to go up. Maybe this is the meta, guys. This is the meta. This is why you want to vote for Labour, to put all these minimum standards and rules in, because then it'll drive up what you can charge for your rental, particularly if you have a property where you don't need to make any changes. Ah, there we go, guys. I figured it out. They may pretend like they care about you. If landlords are genuinely selling up in Victoria, the government could take this opportunity to fix the 10-year public housing waitlist and put an end to homelessness by acquiring these properties for public housing. Oh, come on. Housing is a human right. No, it's not. Nope. That's an ideological position. I would argue it's not a human right. What do you think, everyone? Should housing be a human right? I think the opportunities to get and own private property, including housing, without drastic government intervention that artificially inflates the prices with things like taxation, incentives, and the Candlon effect due to directing money supply at it. Maybe that should be a human right, not housing. We need to take one step back, guys. The renters and housing union. Take one step further out and understand what's causing these problems, because you're just going to exacerbate it with your interventions. They don't have a big enough picture. So let's have a look at the latest weekly rental costs from SQM. And let's have a look. Does this work? No. Okay, I'm trying something new here, guys, with the embedded website. So we can see here, look at units. This is from Melbourne. Weekly rents. All two-bed units, 387. And if we scroll back, how long do we get? There we go. 387. So we're back at 2016 levels. So that was two-bedders. All units, 366. Where are we back? Did we hit that there? Oh, see, yeah, 2016. Same houses, not so bad. Three-bed houses, 512. 512, so around about 2018, we'd say. Maybe a bit less. 2017. So look at that fall in unit prices, guys. Look at that falling right down there. That is quite drastic. Maybe that has something as well to do with people trying to get into property. And I know this is Melbourne itself, but it's indicative of what's going on in the rest of the state, everyone. Now, this is the weekly Melbourne rental listings. And we can see here the rental listings under 30 days. Look at that spike up there, everyone. Look at that. Wow, total. Hang on, we'll look here. Wait, I'll turn off. I'll do laser pointer there. What do we have there? 16,000, everyone. 16,837 have been under 30 days. And those over 30 days, or 30 to 60 days, are 5,500. Those 60 to 90 days on the market, 60 to 90 days, 2,932. This is 90 to 180 days on the market, nearly up to half a year. 4,000 properties. Those over half a year, what is it now? 2,209, guys. So it's going down. What's that? Look at that. Look at that fall from November. So hang on, wait. April 1st, 90 days to 180, 2-1. 60 to 90, 2-2. 6-5 for 30 to 60, and look at that. 16,000. Look at the surge in properties that are on the market. Maybe, just maybe that has something to do with investors looking to sell. What do you reckon? So this is houses versus units, and we'll see here. Total units, 21,888 on the 1st of April, and houses, 8,147. And we can quite clearly see the huge climb up here of units and houses. Sure, there's been a little jump in houses, but nowhere near as much. Look at that. That's nuts. Maybe we've figured it out, guys, why rents are climbing up. And here we have, I mean, this is the weekly rental index for every area, but here we have Melbourne down the bottom, which is what we're focusing at here. There you go. You can see it's all change on previous week down. 3-bedroom house are flat. All units are down. 2-bedroom units are down. So 3 years we're down. 10 years we're just slightly up, not keeping up with inflation, everyone. So the Melbourne market is copying it. It's you know, Adelaide is doing well. Darwin is doing reasonably well. Canberra's still starting to see the red appear. Sydney, we're starting to see the red. Not as bad as Melbourne. You can just see it quite clearly here. And Hobart and Perth, not as much red appearing yet. So, government to the rescue, everyone. Let's have a look at some of these changes to the laws here. We saw they mentioned some of them in the article. Here are a few that I think are interesting, and I'll link to this if you want to go through it. These are the ones that jumped out to me. Starting a tenancy. And here's the, what are you now? You're not a landlord anymore. You're a rental provider, comrade. Remember that. You're a rental provider. So you've got pre-contractual disclosures. And the one thing that I found really interesting here, that you need to inform people about any embedded energy networks. Now that can be a real trap, particularly if you go into a apartment complex, because they're these, you can buy shares in these embedded energy networks. They'll go into developments and they'll put in the phone and power system inside the building, the wiring and all of the infrastructure, and then they will on-charge the provision of those services to each of the people in those units. Brilliant business model. You know, you've got a captured market. You can charge, skim the top. Sometimes they're charging a lot, and the developer loves it because they don't need to pay for any of that infrastructure. It's a win-win, except for the tenants. But so long as you're made aware of that, that should start to be taken into account in the market prices for those rentals. So unsigned rental agreements are enforceable. This is if you have an agreement and your rental provider or landlord or the real estate agent doesn't sign it and return it, but they've accepted your rental payment and you've signed it, it's considered evidence that the contract is enforceable. Now, that's just what I've been taught at university, sadly. Because often as an architect, people won't sign your contracts and you're already working away, or you're still negotiating with the lawyers as halfway through the bloody job sometimes. Although I tend to avoid that now. So, when and how rent... But then again, I've had... It's funny. The only people that have stiffed me on money have had signed contracts, all that stuff. That's only worth as much as you want to spend on lawyers to take it to court. So I've spoken to consultants. They'll sign all these non-competition, all this rubbish. They'll ignore it because, you got to spend $100,000 to fight it. And you'll probably lose. So what and how rent is to be paid. And here is rental providers must also permit rental payments via centre pay. That's like government support going directly to it, but they need to have at least one fee-free method of payment. I always thought that was BS, where they wanted you to use their system. You know, I mean, use BPay. Although we're getting around it just by paying all the rent in one hit, but not everyone has that capacity to do it. So, living in a rental property. Pets, you can get them, but, you know, the rental provider or landlord can apply to VCAT to reasonably refuse them. And there's new repeat process for late payments. So, you pretty much have 4 times you can be late in your payment in a 12-month period. With the 5th, you can't be. 4 times you can be late. I mean, that to me seems pretty dodgy. If you're depending on that money, you should get it on when it's due, but there you go. That's the expectations of a rental provider in Victoria. So can you be depending on that, guys? You got to have a big float for this. So rent controls. I want to bring this up because I imagine I want to preempt the fact that there are going to be calls for this coming soon. Because look, we're having more and more intervention in the market. They're setting all these minimum standards, which sound good, but will squeeze people out of the market and will remove some rental providers from the market. There's going to be calls for rent controls. We'll see it soon, eventually. And I want to highlight the issues that this will cause as well, because it's no different to anything. Now, before we do that, here we have just the rental affordability from last year. There's black line is median. Bottom line of the chart is showing you your income. So if you're in the 100% income quartile, you're right at the top. You can, affordability is only going to be an issue for you in Greater Sydney, Greater Sydney pretty much. Almost not, but still about there. If you're above this line, so 80%, all of these cities are going to be affordable to you. All of these ones here. That will be how much of the market you have access to. So you're in Brisbane, you've got access to about 90% of the properties there. You're 80%. Oh, sorry. Nope, that's Greater Perth, 90% of the properties. Brisbane, slightly less. So we do have a rental affordability issue, guys. That's the thing. And they're saying here that it's an issue if you're spending more than 30% of your disposable income on rental, everyone. So this is rent controls. This here is a free market where we have a demand and supply curve, and they meet at a point where there's a market price and a quantity provided. This is a gross simplification of the rental market, but it's good to understand. So, the market, the invisible hand, will set a price that people are willing to pay. Now, if you set a maximum rent here, what happens is, this is your maximum rent, this amount here, that's the rental charge. Demand for housing will shoot up. It'll all be here. We want this much housing. But rental and or if you set a minimum standard for properties, landlords will exit the market, so supply will decrease. Demand will increase, supply will decrease. So this can create excessive demand, everyone. This is all the additional demand that you have by the rent prices, and it reduces the return of landlords. So landlords should be getting this money, but now they're only going to get this money. It will reduce how much money they can make. So it'll cause a fall in supply. So the supply curve shifts back down here. So now you've only got this much rental properties available. Where in the market you should have had this much, but the demand is now up here. So there's a problem. So what happens? Well, you've got a shortage of rental properties, or what happens most likely is that there is a black market in rent, dodgy extra fees, charges, money under the table. Who suffers? Those who can least afford it. This is the problem when we intervene in the market, everyone. I know people want everyone to have a minimum standard. People want everyone to, you can look at that going, how can someone live like that? How can someone put up with that? You bloody well have to, guys. Sometimes, if life is doing it hard, you just put up with stuff. People are much stronger than they realize. You put up with stuff, you go through the hard times, and then you build yourself up. But if you remove those bottom rungs of the ladder to get into property, to get into housing, you'll just create more homelessness. You'll create more social issues. You'll destroy hope for people. That's the problem. So some solutions, everyone. Well, this is it's kind of a meme on this channel. I will constantly refer to the declining economic complexity of our country here in Australia. And I thought, because I'm now experimenting with a new presentation style, I'm bringing in websites into my PowerPoints to make it easier. I thought I would just show you this chart I found from the Observatory of Economic Complexity, which shows the declining complexity of our economy, and the complexity refers to the exports that Australia makes. So from 99, guys, the Olympics, we've gone from an ECI ranking of 40 down to nearly 80. Over 80. These are other countries that have a comparable GDP per capita to us. Look at them. Look at us. My argument is that this has been exacerbated since 2000 due to government interventions, due to a misallocation of investment of the wealth of our nation into property. What do you reckon? Now, solutions. We need to acknowledge that the Andrews government is going to unintentionally, perhaps, drive up housing costs, drive up rental costs, okay? Good old Andrews, everyone's friend. You need to advocate for local and state governments to increase the supply of homes, increase access to land for developers. Don't vote for parties who limit development, guys, and construction, or the NIMBY crowd, the greenies and the hipsters that will advocate for affordable housing, cheap rentals, but argue for policies that drive up the cost for housing and rentals. Is it intentional? Is that intentional to cause social issues, or is it just unintended lack of understanding? I'm hoping it's unintentional. Perhaps it isn't. So, there we have it, everyone. Thank you for joining me for this episode of HeiseSays. Please let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one in the comments down below. If you're a fan of the channel and enjoy the content I create here, there are a few ways you can support us. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links from Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or AussieBroadband. You can buy merch from HeiseSays, use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Take care, everyone. Have a great day, and I will see you all in the next episode. Bye for now.